And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in the state of Texas.
Well, John, we told you that former Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price is launching her own podcast. She's got some getting even to do. She's got a story to tell, but there's one problem, as evidenced by her first episode of the podcast. She doesn't know how to talk into the microphone.
That's just a snapshot of the challenges that people face when they are detained and when the government moves in to detain someone. So if you are part of the movement in Alameda County to protect immigrant communities, just know that what we do here matters.
I had T-Mobile for years, so I can actually understand her.
It is a video podcast. You can look for it by Googling Pamela Price on the YouTubes. And she is at least a foot away from the microphone on a podcast.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but I believe that there are clear tapes of people who are targets of the U.S. government speaking to FBI informants who are wearing a wire underneath 4 layers of clothes. Where is she broadcasting that podcast through? The Clown's Nose and Jack in the Box?
Quite frankly.
Oh, you should see the video. The setup is pretty epic.
What kind of set does she have for this?
She's got a whole bunch of phony baloney degrees behind her.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Pamela Price. I'm sure there's a bachelor's degree up there. I'm sure there's a law degree from some school that advertises on Maury. What does she moonlight as a chiropractor?
Johnny, whenever someone starts a podcast, usually the first couple of episodes, you want to introduce yourself to the audience, let them know your backstory. Do you think we'll get an episode where she'll tell us about all the times she got bipped?
I've been bipped several times.
Well, that'll be a long one. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. You watch him each and every weeknight on the news on Fox 11. You also watch his weekly public affairs television program on Fox 11 in Los Angeles, KTVU in the Bay Area. It's The Issue Is. And you follow him on X at Elex_Michaelson. Elex Michaelson, welcome.
Thanks so much, John. Reporting to you live this week from East LA College, where I just stepped out of a press conference that Governor Newsom was holding here. How you doing today?
I am good, and maybe he talked about this at the press conference today. Maybe he didn't. Maybe you have some insight on it. But what is the deal? If you're the governor of California, that's a very busy job. You have a large economy to run. You have the California State University system, the University of California system, the community colleges. You're responsible for the prisons. You got a lot to do. Yet, as governor, he has not hosted one podcast. He is now hosting a second podcast because I guess he's got the free time to throw his hat into the world of broadcasting. What's the deal with him hosting these podcasts?
Well, you say that, and literally about a minute and a half ago, I just asked him about it. So I can give you the new reporting first right here on the John Phillips Show. I said to him, you know, what do you say to people who feel like this is a distraction from your day job? And he said quite the opposite. It's a continuation of the day job. He says the way that the media has changed, you got to communicate to people in different ways, that it's important to engage with different ideas, that it's a new way of getting the message out about California, about what he's trying to do. He basically said the idea for this came that he has a lot of Republican and conservative friends that he talks to all the time and has thought, wow, this should be a podcast. I think this would be interesting for people to hear the fact that we're able to disagree but have a civil conversation. And so I think the idea with this one is going to be, I asked him who's going to be on, who's an example of somebody like that. And he didn't say, he basically said, you'll be seeing the show soon. But I'm curious who he's referring to. But yeah, I mean, it is clear that it does take up time out of his thinking and his week, and he does spend more time on a podcast than he does oftentimes doing one-on-one interviews with local reporters in the state. And he I think views that as the most valuable use of his time.
Here's what I think. I think that he looked at the last election and he learned all of the wrong things from Donald Trump's success. Part of what made Donald Trump successful in the November election, specifically with younger male voters who Gavin Newsom would need in his corner if he were to win a presidential election, is that Donald Trump went and met them where they were. And he spoke to them in places that were comfortable to them. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast. He went on the Undertaker podcast. He went on any number of podcasts and spoke to these young males in a forum that they enjoy listening to. But what Gavin Newsom is doing is he says, okay, it was the podcast that helped Donald Trump, so I'll just make my own podcast and that'll work for me. No. When you go on these podcasts, you're not going into your own social network. You're going into their social network. You're talking to Joe Rogan's social network and the Undertaker social network, and you're exposing yourself to all of these people that may not be listening to a politician's podcast. It's why people, when they're selling a book or they're promoting a movie, they go on all the chat shows, because you're talking to the Tonight Show's audience, or you're talking to Oprah's audience, or whatever, and you're exposing your product to new people. Gavin Newsom is doing it the opposite way, and no one's going to listen to this thing.
I don't know, because what if he invites Joe Rogan on his podcast and Joe Rogan comes on? What if he has Ben Shapiro on? What if if he has people that have huge audiences in the conservative space who are willing to come on and then promote that to their audiences, maybe there is a chance of that, because that would be going outside the typical echo chamber that you would get. I mean, that to me is the only way I could see it really breaking through to new people. And I'm interested to see what his guest list looks like.
But if you want access to their audience, you go on their podcast.
You go on their podcast, which is already being downloaded by their people, but you potentially have a chance if they talk about it on their podcast, check this out, and they're willing to promote this as well. Maybe there's a chance for that. But you're right. I mean, the easier entry is, Joe Rogan already has so many people that just get his show delivered to them every single week to be there where they're already getting the show versus signing up for something new.
Here's the problem with that, though. Politicians are typically boring interviews. Politicians, the good ones at least, usually stick to the script and they don't deviate from the script. And if you can get them off their script, and you do this very well, then you make news, because you get them to say something that they didn't intend to say, and usually they reveal some kernel of truth in those statements, and that makes news. Gavin Newsom is an extremely disciplined politician. If he goes on these podcasts, my guess is it's going to be the same Gavin Newsom that we're used to, and he's not going to be one of these Donald Trump type of politicians that goes on and just kind of freestyles it.
I'll say nobody is the level of Donald Trump of that, which is why he's the president, which is why he's a worldwide phenomenon and all of that. I will say, having interviewed pretty much everybody in the California space, Republican and Democrat, Gavin Newsom is not always the most disciplined. And he gets bored by a lot of the talking points, and sometimes he will allow himself to go off script. And I think there is part of him that enjoys this idea of being an entertainer and being a host, and kind of likes to mock the political, standard thing. And so we'll see if he does that on his own show, and he knows how to juice ratings. I mean, if anything, the guy studies all of that stuff like Trump. I mean, he studies ratings. He studies what's happening online. He's very well aware of what's trending. He watches Fox News every single night. And he has a real understanding, I think, of what people on the right are thinking in a way that most people on the left do not. He makes that a big point. Now, that hasn't necessarily won him over a big audience on the right, that's for sure. But he does go out of his way, I think, in that space in a way that most, certainly California politicians, do not.
We're speaking with Elex Michaelson, who you can follow on X at Elex_Michaelson. Elex, let's shift gears here for a second and talk about Mayor Karen Bass. The mayor of Los Angeles under fire right now due to the lack of response or the poor response to the fires that swept through Southern California in the month of January. The mayor is trying to shift blame from her office to others, and as part of that endeavor, she's making claims that are provably false, including saying that she was not aware of the wind, when in fact, now we learned through CBS News that her staffers had attended events for the National Weather Service where they were warned about the wind. Certainly her own Twitter feeds put out different warnings about the wind, urging Angelenos to take caution. We know that the fire chief has kept copious notes of all of her correspondence between her department and the mayor's office. The mayor has also claimed that she never cut the budget of the fire department. It's been reported that the fire chief, we know that $17 million had in fact been cut from the budget, but we know that she wanted to cut even more from the fire department's budget, and the chief apparently kept very detailed notes and copies of all of her correspondence with the mayor on that topic as well. While the mayor was out of the country, the Council President Pro Tem Marquise Harris Dawson, he said that the fire department never said anything to him about the wind. And now, according to Monica Rodriguez and other members of the LA City Council, that's not true, and they have the receipts on that as well. What do you think the strategy is here to make claims that can be proven to be false and then just to double and triple and quadruple down and keep coming up with new ones?
Yeah, well, speaking of Gavin Newsom being disciplined, my colleagues were just pushing him on a lot of those questions, and he didn't want to say anything about Karen Bass at all. It was going out of his way to avoid her, just like he's gone out of his way to avoid doing press conferences with her, because I think he sees some of the political writing on the wall on some of this. I don't understand it, to answer your question. I don't understand why some of this is going on. To me, the strategy that works the best is just to be as transparent, truthful as possible. Sometimes say that we got it wrong or I made the wrong call. I mean, I was kind of stunned doing the interview last week that got all that attention when she said that she wasn't aware of the warnings, knowing how all of us had been talking about the warnings. I wasn't expecting her to say that. That was a strange thing to say. I think what she was really frustrated with, really drilling down with her, was that she hadn't heard more from Kristen Crowley directly. She felt like Kristen Crowley didn't communicate to her until after the fires had started, and that in the past, that's something that the fire chief would raise a red flag for something like that. But it does raise questions about the communication flow in the mayor's office. If what Mayor Bass is saying is true, that Crowley didn't reach out to her, that people in her staff we now know were at a briefing and nobody on her staff communicated that to her, on top of her not watching any of the local newscasts, on top of her not going on social media at all the ways that the rest of us learn information. It raises serious questions about what is the information flow to the mayor of Los Angeles, and how does that message not get to her? And then there are serious questions, I think, about competence of the staff in that situation if she really is, in fact, unaware.
Well, her staffer that's supposed to be the liaison between her office and the fire department's on administrative leave for allegedly making false bomb threats. And that leads back to the decision-making process of the mayor. What kind of judgment do you have if you're hiring someone who, instead of doing their job, is making bomb threats to different entities?
Right. I think there's real questions about that. Of course, he has denied that and is fighting that vigorously, and there's a lot of people that are defending him as well. But yes, I think there are real questions about the staffing at the mayor's office, their competence, their communication strategy, and the strategy, frankly, to wait 43 days to do a sit-down interview like the one she did with me and answer some of these questions and talk more directly with the people. I don't think that whole thing last week would have been as big of a deal if she would have been communicating more regularly in in-depth forums in the middle of this crisis. And what I think was interesting was during this crisis, having been on the air for hours and hours, as you have been, we have been in communication regularly with everybody from the governor to all the members of the board of supervisors to the members of the city council to the fire chief to all these other officials. And the mayor was the one person who was not granting any interview requests. And that was pretty dramatic in terms of the difference from everybody else.
Well, and this leads to the question, what is the expectation of the fire chief? Because let's be honest, the fire chief is an employee of the mayor. The mayor is the chief executive of the city, and the fire chief, while they're a department head and they're high ranking, you still work for the mayor. In what world would you ever go into your boss's office? Let's say the Lakers are in the world championship and you have a hunch that if they win that there's going to be some kind of unrest going on in downtown LA. And your boss is supposed to be in Florida taking the family to Walt Disney World. And you march right in there and pound on the door and say, you know what? I think there's going to be trouble after this basketball game, and you need to cancel your vacation, and you need to be here because you need to be in charge of the station if something goes sideways. In no normal world would any employee say that to their boss. That's not how people interact with one another, and it's not appropriate.
Mayor Bass seems to, in the interview with us and in subsequent conversations in these press conferences, has suggested that is basically the way that it had worked traditionally with Crowley and her in the past, which is why it was so stunning for her that there was no communication at all on this particular event. I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship. I'm sure more of that is going to come out in the days and weeks ahead. I'm really curious to see what Kristen Crowley does next. I mean, she put out a short statement, but will she try to get her job back? Will she sue the department? Will she? Where is she going to go from here? I think is a really interesting question, and we just don't know.
When you're conducting an interview, you're very much in the moment. You've got some questions that are pre-planned. Certainly, you're paying attention to what they're saying. So if they say something interesting, you can ask follow-up questions related to their answer. When you were interviewing Karen Bass, could you tell in the moment that this interview was going to be a major problem for her?
I don't think maybe to the extent, but I was really, really surprised by the I was unaware answer. And I didn't expect that. And there were other things she said that I thought were surprising. When we asked her about Steve Soboroff and the $500,000 contract to, help the city, she said that she had to twist his arm to give him $500,000 to work for 3 months at a time of the greatest crisis in our city. I was like stunned by that phrase, twist his arm, because most people hearing that will have just lost everything. It just that doesn't compute, I think, to most people. And there were some moments that were surprising. I mean, the other challenge in that interview, in an interview like that, which you can relate to, is you're also running up against the clock. I was told that I was given 10 minutes for her. She actually ended up sitting for longer and was not rushing me through, which was nice. But I didn't know if at 10 minutes that they would stop the interview and say, okay, enough, we're done, which they had a right to after saying 10 minutes before. So, I wish, listening to it back, that there were some other things that I could have even drilled down on even more if I knew that I was going to have more time. And I hope in the future that there's an opportunity to talk with her more, because I think there's a lot of interest. And if she continues, as she said that she will, that running for re-election is something that she's really focused on. I think that there's going to be more interviews, not only with me, but with other people to try to explain some of this stuff, because she keeps talking about moving forward. But I think until people get satisfactory answers to some of these issues, it's hard for most people to move forward.
If she did not regard Rick Caruso as a potential candidate to run against her for re-election, I wonder if it would have been Rick Caruso that would have been appointed to be the man to rebuild the Palisades.
I think she should have done it anyways. I actually said that privately to some of my colleagues that would have been a brilliant move, wouldn't it? It would make her look big. It would sort of neutralize him. It would tie the two of them together, and it would make it so that he couldn't really criticize her. And he's really good at this kind of stuff. So it would have, I think it would have been in both of their best interests. And I have honestly, privately talked with both of them about, the concept of them working together, the West Wing in me that likes the idea of like Jimmy Smits and Alan Alda and a team of rivals. And I like Karen Bass and Rick Caruso both personally a lot. I have great respect and affection for both of them away from their work and would like that concept of them working together. But I think it has been underreported, the level of disdain that the two of them have for each other. And I don't think a partnership is happening anytime soon.
Elex Michaelson, host of The Issue Is, which airs Friday nights on Fox 11 in Los Angeles, KTVU in the Bay Area, and of course you can watch him anchor the news each and every weeknight on Fox 11 and follow him on X at Elex_Michaelson. Elex, what's coming up on the big show this week?
We don't know yet. If you want to come on, we'd love to have you, but we got to figure out what's going to happen this week on The Issue Is. So try to figure it out.
All right. Well, I'll be watching this Friday night. Elex, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks. Thanks, John.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to listen to yesterday's show or the show before that, or maybe even the first hour of today's show when we sign off the air at 3, Randy, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to kabc.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. We need your support more than ever because there's even more competition in the podcast space. We're competing against Gavin freaking Newsom.
This is Gavin Newsom.
Well, as we mentioned before, it's not just Gavin Newsom who's out with a podcast. Randy, another familiar voice, has joined the podcasting world.
Today was the premiere of Pamela Price's new podcast, the former recalled Alameda County District Attorney.
Quite frankly.
So she's going on a media blitz with all the Bay Area stations to talk about her new podcast and her first public appearances talking about the recall. Let's hear what she had to say to KRON 4.
Time in office was controversial. She did sit down with KRON 4's Lesla Gooden, who joins us now in studio with the details. Lesla.
Yes, I have to tell you, I was able to sit down with Pamela Price for over 30 minutes to talk about her time.
They only used 3 minutes of it.
Well, what interesting things does that woman have to say?
Here in Alameda, and she tells me that, it was not exactly what she expected. And tonight she's sharing what is going through her mind the moment she realized that she was recalled, and also what she would have done differently and what's next for her. Take a listen.
It's been 2 months since former district attorney of Alameda County, Pamela Price, had her last day in office after she was recalled by residents. In office for just 2 years, Price describes her.
And what a 2 years that was.
Oh, yes. She certainly did leave a mark.
Oh, my God. They melted the basketball court.
Including that one.
Price describes her experience as intense and believes she was not supported from the moment she stepped into office.
That's because you were advocating for things that put your constituents in danger.
You're the DA and you support the criminals, and people have a problem with that, and for some reason, that surprises you.
People were misled and deceived by some very, a whole lot of misstatements and misinformation.
Sure. Keep believing that.
Is it only me, or does this woman sound high 24/7?
People were misled and deceived by some very, a whole lot of misstatements and misinformation. I am rooted here. I love this place.
For the first time since leaving.
Then why did you want to destroy it?
And you did a pretty good job of that.
place.
For the first time since leaving office, Price is sitting down and speaking with us to share what's next for her.
Really was an unfolding process, and just very disappointing to see that happening again in my beloved Oakland and Alameda County.
She feels betrayed.
Oh, yes. The people of Oakland turned on her. A Shakespearean tragedy.
How dare they want to not get robbed?
Alameda County, we were just really under siege for so long. And I think that my decision to start a podcast became the next thing.
Price.
That because nobody was offering you any job whatsoever?
That means this woman was an unemployable pariah.
Price says the podcast is her idea of staying connected with the people of Alameda County. And
the people that rejected you 2-1?
Wasn't even close.
And still wanting to serve them. But we asked her if there was anything she would change during her time as DA.
You know, when Larry Krasner took office in Philadelphia, he fired 30 lawyers. I probably should have done more because the office was too divided.
I should have gone in there with an Elon Musk-style chainsaw.
Well, and that's, of course, what George Gascon tried to do. He either punished people or tried to chase them out of the office altogether, which is why there were so many lawsuits against him.
Because the office was too divided. When you come into an organization that hasn't seen change.
I needed to fire all of the people that believed that we were on the side of the victims and hire a whole bunch of people that believed we were on the side of the criminals.
I don't even know if that's possible. Who goes to law school wanting to become a district attorney so they can let all the criminals out?
Well, there's quite a few of them now, although there's less of them now than there used to be.
That's got to be a real hard person to find.
That hasn't seen change in 50 years. The level of resistance that we encountered amongst the staff was pretty unprecedented.
They also didn't care for the fact that you were forcing them to refer to you as Madam District Attorney.
Oh, yes. They hated her for a variety of reasons.
Pretty unprecedented. Other kinds of things that we could have done better was I would say that we needed to get our communications team on board a lot quicker than what we...
This is the same BS that Ferrer says when she's asked if she made any mistakes during COVID, which we documented pretty much every day for a year. She says, I wish I could have communicated better.
Yeah. That, by the way, is not an answer. That's an insult to the people that you were expected to serve. I should have dumbed down my policies more so that these stupid people understood them better
than what we did.
And she shares her thoughts on the new district attorney, Ursula Jones, and her current plans for the county.
I think the new district attorney will benefit greatly from the work that we did in terms of...
The new district attorney vowed on day one to undo everything that you did.
Oh, yeah, but she's got to curry favor because that woman is now in charge of the office.
From the work that we did in terms of improving victim services and expanding the victims...
Was it the victims of crime and the relatives of victims of crime, the ones that organized to recall her?
They were the ones that chased her around the county.
Expanding the Victims Advocate Division, improving the technology.
Price, who was elected...
Who was it? It was Brenda Grisham that was trying to just have a conversation with Pamela Price, and she kept getting shunned, kept getting and then it was like, all right, we're going to recall your ass.
Didn't she insult them, too?
Oh, yeah.
Price, who was elected as DA in 2022, got enough recall signatures to be on the ballot in November's election. And during the election, at one point, she refused to concede, still fighting for her position. And we wanted to know what she was thinking during this moment.
And so, watching that unfold it wasn't just one night. It really was an unfolding process. And just...
Actually, the second that even the first batch of results were in, it was fairly clear you were donezo.
It's one thing to hold off on conceding if it's a close race. We see that all the time. It's another thing to hold off on conceding when you've been blown out.
And so, watching that unfold wasn't just one night. It really was an unfolding process.
The more you hear from her, the more you understand this person is completely disconnected from reality.
Well, and she also has a room temperature IQ. All you need to hear is one interview with this woman to realize that she could hide her own Easter eggs.
And just very disappointing to see that happening.
While reflecting on her time as DA, Price says she isn't done with Alameda County.
And they're done with her.
They're very done with her.
And we asked her if she would ever run for office again.
I don't think it's off the table. I think what I will talk about on Pamela Price Unfiltered is how, disappointing politics is and how politics and public safety don't mix well.
What?
Well, that's what happens when you lose the election. What do they say? Don't hate the player, hate the game.
And Price's podcast is officially live, and she tells me that she's excited for this new role and will be sharing all the things she couldn't say while she was the DA. In studio, Liz Gooden, Crown 4 News.
And as we found out earlier, it's still going to be hard for her to share the things that she wants to say because Pamela Price doesn't understand how microphones work.
That's just a snapshot of the challenges that people face when they are detained and when the government moves in to detain someone. So if you are part of the movement in Alameda County to protect immigrant communities, just know that what we do here matters.
Also, what's with the Power 106 music in the background of the entire thing?
Yeah, she's got an engineer who's playing the R&B music over her, but won't tell her to speak directly into the microphone. Maybe she is right. Maybe she should fire more people. I wonder if it's Brett doing her IT too.
Well, you got to have a special level of incompetence to be getting hired by Pamela Price to post her podcast. By the way, all those media interviews are doing great for her. Her brand new podcast has 200 views, and I'm pretty sure I'm 10 of them.
200 views. That's about 199 more than I expected.
Now, to be fair, she changed her Pamela Price campaign YouTube account to the new Pamela Price Unfiltered YouTube account, so I was already a subscriber, one of 144 people.
Well, it sounds like she's not going to need to find a new job. She'll be making enough money from this podcast so she can get herself a new car, she can get herself a big house, and in the backyard, she can build one of those cement ponds.
What do you think's her first endorsement deal is going to be? One of those low T ads?
Crime scene tape.
Quite frankly.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Ryan from Glendale writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com on Gavin Newsom's new podcast. Hey, Randy, please, please, please have the first guest on Gavin's new podcast be Adam Carolla. That would be a one and done for Gavi.
I think he's already stepped on that rake before, hasn't he?
Oh, yes. Well, Gavin Newsom, when he was lieutenant governor, went on Adam Carolla's podcast, and it didn't go well for him. But you remember last June, during that dreadful Biden debate, Gavin Newsom was doing spin on all the networks, and he did a hit with News Nation, and Adam Carolla was there, and it did not go well.
Adam Carolla here. Governor, why did you shut the beaches in California during COVID?
Yeah, I think we all were working on information at the time. We had no basis of deeply understanding the virus. I think they
So
did
you
the
didn't
same
know
thing.
anything,
I know they did the
so
same
why'd you
thing in
shut the
states
beaches?
like Florida.
I think he would be an excellent booking for Gavin.
Hey, you want to make a splash? That's one of the OG biggest podcasters out there.